So good morning to all of you. Myself I am Rajan from Department of Agricultural Engineering at Sri Shanmugha College of Engineering and Technology. In the series of Introduction to Urban Horticulture, it is a part 3 video. You can refer part 1, part 2 videos in our college channel for understanding the topic of today's session. So in continuation of that, in today's class we're going to see that what are the key challenges to be faced in doing the urban horticulture practices in our urban area. That is the concept we're going to see in today's session. So there are four things mainly restricting to doing the urban horticulture practices in urban area. So that is we have discussed in this session. We can move to next slide. Yes, so as a scope of today's session, in this first slide I given this different key challenges in the urban horticulture. I listed here. You can see in this slide. So urban horticulture is the practice of intensive plant cultivation within cities, and while it offers high yields per square foot, it faces significant technical, environmental and social political hurdles. Okay, so I listed here, I'm going to mark the four things that makes the obstacles to doing the urban horticulture. First one is the environmental and microclimatic stressors. Then second one is the soil toxicity and legacy, pollution, and third one is the resource, logistics and infrastructure. The fourth one is the legal and social economic barriers. So in the upcoming slides, we're going to see detailed review of these things are going to affect the urban horticulture in practices we going to do in the our urban area. So these these are the some problems the creators to doing the urban horticulture practices in our urban area. So okay, next slide we're going to see that first one, that is the environmental microclimatic stressors. Okay, we can move to next slide. Yes, you can see that environmental and microclimate stressors are one of the important factor that decides to doing the urban horticulture practices in our urban area. That's why I listed in the first factor. Okay, so I'm going to mark that. The first one is the heat urban island effect, and then the second one is the light canyons and sadding and wind tunneling. So the city environment creates a unique microclimate that can be hostile to many plant species. The first one is the urban heat island effect. That means so heat island effect means the concrete and asphalt absorb heat during the day and radiate it at night. This nighttime heating can prevent plants from entering necessary dormant phases. So disrupt pollination as some pollen becomes sterile at high heat. Okay, and it increases water evaporation rates. So that is the urban heat island effect. So simply we can say that the different temperature variation in the layers of the environment, that's called urban heat island effect. Shortly we can call it as UHI. The second one is the light canyons and shading. So in light, that means it in dense urban areas, tall buildings create permanent shadows. So most productive horticulture crops like tomatoes or peppers require a minimum of 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. Finding full sun in a city is often a single biggest physical barrier for the harvest. The third one is the wind tunneling. So wind tunneling means high risk of buildings funnel wind into high velocity tunnels that can be physically damage fragile crops, topple containers and cause rapid desiccations, that means drying out of foliage. So these are the three things that makes the impact on urban horticulture practices in our urban area. So we have to consider these things before we doing this practice in our home. Okay, we can move to next slide. So in the next slide, I given that second parameter that decides the urban horticulture practice in our urban area, that is soil toxicity and legacy pollution. So in an urban setting, so natural resources are often compromised. So the first one is the heavy metal contamination, the second one is the atmospheric deposition, and third is the soil compaction. So these things also plays a vital role in deciding the urban horticulture practices in our urban area. So soil toxicity and legacy pollution means, unlike rural soil, urban soil is often a repository for historical industry activity. So due to the industrial activity, soils in the urban area having the high compaction and having the high metal content itself and atmospheric deposition. The first one is the heavy metal contamination. So lead and arsenic and cadmium are common in city diet. These metals can be absorbed by leafy greens and root vegetables, posing a direct health risk to consumers. The second one is the atmospheric deposition. So even if the soil is clean, city grime, soot and particulate matter size 2.5 and heavy metals from brake dust can settle on the leaves of the plant. This requires rigorous washing and sometimes protective hoop houses to keep food safe. The third is the soil compaction. As its name itself implies that soil has the high compaction ratio. So if the soil has the high compaction, roots can't penetrate into the soil and can't absorb the nutrients from the soil. That leads the plant to failure. So soil compaction means years of food traffic and construction leave urban dirt devoid of the pore space needed for oxygen and water to reach plant roots. Okay, I hope that you understood the three parameters playing the roles in affecting the urban horticulture practices in our urban area. So we can move to next slide. So in this slide, I given the resource logistics difficulties in doing this urban horticulture practices in our urban area. So modern infrastructure is not always garden friendly, okay, because that are heavy and that is are not suit for plant growth. So these are some things makes the plant failure. The first one is the weight of water and soil. The second one is the water access and cost, and third is the high energy demand. So we can see it each one detailedly. The first one is the weight of water and soil. So urban infrastructures was built for drainage and stability, not for supporting life. Yes. So as in the according to that, the weight of water and soil means the rooftop gardening is limited by the structural load capacity of buildings. So saturated soil is indirectly heavy, roughly under lbs per cubic foot. That is can be seen in our urban areas. So without engineering reinforcement, many rooftops cannot safely support a full-scale garden. So that is the one thing that restricts the urban horticulture practices in buildings in our urban area. So the weight creates the impact on foundation of that building. That's why that is impossible in some case of buildings. The second one is the water. The second one is that water access and cost. So that means water access and cost means many vacant lots or community spaces do not have dedicated water meters. So growers often have to rely on expensive municipal water meant for drinking. So our gorilla method like howling chalks, which limits the scale of operation. Okay, so that so one of the thing that restrict to doing the urban horticulture in our urban area. The third one is high energy demand. So to bypass light and space issues, many turn to vertical farming. Okay. However, the energy required for LED lighting and HVAC system to maintain the climate control can make the carbon footprint of local food so higher than traditional sipped produce. Okay, so I hope that you understood the three things how they are restricting the urban horticulture practices in our urban area. We can move to next slide. That in this slide given the I gave the socio-economic and legal barriers. Often the biggest hurdles are not the plants but the people and the rules. Okay, that is main thing. We're going to do that practice and support from the government and the local situation. Okay, the legal and socio-economic barriers, the human side of urban gardening is often more complex than the biological side. So first one is the land tenure and insecurity. The second one is the zoning and nuisance laws, and third is the green gentrification paradox. So I'm going to explain these three things. The first one is the land tenure insecurity. So land tenure insecurity means most urban gardens are on the temporary leases. Yes, if land value rises, developers can reclaim the lot. So meaning years of soil building and community effort can be wiped out in a few weeks. This discourages the planting of perennial crops like fruit trees which take years to yield. Yes, so if you are living in a urban area in for rent in rental in rent, so the owner will come and ask your land at any time. If the land values rises, the owner automatically thinks to sell the land in good price. So if you are in the rented house or rented place in the urban area, you can't keep your garden for lifelong, because owner will make the decisions to vacate yourself. Okay, so these things, the one of the parameter in legal and socio-economic barriers restricts the urban horticulture practices in urban area. The second one is the zoning and nuisance law. So zoning and nuisance laws means many cities still have outdated codes that classify front yard vegetable gardens and composting as nuisances. So regulatory hurdles for selling produce grown in a residential zone can also stifle small-scale urban entrepreneurs. Okay, the third one is the gentrification paradox. This means grain gentrification occurs when beautification of a neighborhood through community gardens leads to high property values and potentially displacing the low income residents the garden was intended to help. So finally I would like to tell that the challenges like toxic soil, low light and wind stresses and high water costs are creating the challenges to grow the crops in our urban area. For toxic soil, we can follow the mitigation strategy like using of raised beds with a geotextile barrier and imported organic soil. And then for low light condition in the urban area, we can use as the mitigation strategies like focus on the shade tolerant crops like kale, spinach, mint. Okay, so or use white reflective surfaces. That is also good for plant can get the light. Okay, then the wind stress. To reduce the wind stress problem, we have to follow the strategies, mitigation strategies like installing the windbreaks. In windbreaks, for example, for windbreaks, is the mesh fencing is good for our system. So, or we can use low profile heavy containers to avoid the wind stresses. The another thing we can say is a restriction to growing the crops in urban area is high water cost. That is one important thing. To resolve that issue, we can install the rainwater harvesting systems in the barrels, or you can say save the waters in the barrels of our home, and you can use the heavy mulching to retain the moisture condition in the field. Okay, these are the things that restricting the urban horticulture practices in our urban area. So by before we doing the urban horticulture practices, we have to consider this all the restrictions um, to resolved before we have to start the process in our home. Okay. Okay, thank you. We can move to next slide. Okay, I think it's enough for today classes. I hope you understand the today's concept. I will come with new topics in next class. Thank you.